Jesus taught in parables. I want to take a look at the parables, a couple of parables that Jesus taught, or more properly speaking, parables that are attributed to Jesus in the New Testament, because like I said before, the only source we have of what Jesus actually taught is what's written in the New Testament. And again, the New Testament was written in Greek. Jesus did not write it. Jesus didn't speak Greek. So it's like we're thrice removed from the source, if not even more so than that, because the Gospels weren't written until, well, many, many years after Jesus' death. So you spoke in Aramaic decades after his death. They are written down in one language or another, eventually in Greek, right? And then the Greek eventually translated into, well, English, like King James. Okay. What is a parable? A parable is like a little allegorical story. For example, Aesop's fables. Remember the old story of the tortoise and the hare? Well, that's a kind of parable, isn't it? It's an allegory. It's a story with a moral message. The tortoise is very slow. They're in a race, the tortoise and the rabbit. The rabbit's very fast. The rabbit's overconfident, so the rabbit's kind of screwing around, while the tortoise, the turtle, is just slowly but persistently and with dedication headed toward the finish line. And the tortoise beats the hare. I hope that's how the fable ends, because that makes sense. There's a moral message that of the value of persistence and dedication, and the problem of distraction and overconfidence. Now, when I hear or read the story of the tortoise and the hare, I get it. I don't need someone to sit down and explain to me what the tortoise signifies and what the rabbit signifies. They're like two parallel lines. They don't touch each other, they don't intersect. But I make the connection between the two. I make the connection between the allegorical references and the moral message that has relevance to my life, personally. Turtles and rabbits may not be relevant, but the ideas of persistence and dedication and the problems of overconfidence and distraction, these are relevant to me. So I get the parable. Not so with many of the parables Jesus says, and perhaps ironically, Jesus even acknowledges that people may not or will not understand the parables he teaches. I'm going to quote using a little book that contains all that Jesus said from the Bible. It puts it all into a single volume and categorizes it for reference. Jesus says this, and this is sourced in 3 of the Gospels. I'll reference Matthew chapter 13, verse 11. Jesus says to his disciples, when his disciples ask why he speaks in parables, Jesus says, "Because it has been given to you, the disciples, to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them," the public that he's teaching these parables to them it has not been given. Okay, therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. And then he goes on to reference that this was prophesied, and he refers to some Old Testament passage that this is supposedly a fulfillment of that prophecy. Imagine a teacher who says to his in-crowd, "They're not going to understand what I teach." Then why are you teaching? This disturbs me. Okay? Let's take a look at a couple of the parables that Jesus is teaching the public. And by the way, guess the position we are in as readers? We're the public. We're not the disciples. We're not the in-crowd. We don't get the inside message. And if you think that you are in the in-crowd because of that specific passage in the Bible, which I'm about to read, where Jesus explains to his disciples the meaning of the parable, we're going to find out that his explanation is just more metaphor. Let's take a look at it. It's the parable of the sower. Very popular parable. It's in 3 of the Gospels. I'll reference in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13, the sower. Behold, a sower went out to sow, Jesus says. And so as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds ate it. Some fell on stony places, and so on and so forth. He explains the parable of the sower. And then afterwards, he tells his disciples, therefore hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. Okay, this is supposed to be the explanation of an allegory, but it's just another allegory. The word of the kingdom. Well, the word of the kingdom, you mean the parable. Again, it's metaphor. It's not an explanation. The wicked one comes and snatches it. The wicked one. Another metaphor. So he's trying to get away with explaining metaphors with more metaphors. This is not an explanation. Again, he goes on, he who received the seed on stony places, this is he who hears the word. Again, the word, it's ambiguous. The word meaning the parable, the word meaning what he teaches, which is the parable, the word. He who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself. No root in himself. More metaphor, not explicit. When tribulation or persecution arises because of the word, more metaphor, don't know, immediately he stumbles. And now he wraps up, Jesus says, but he who receives the seed on the good ground is he who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and produces, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. So he's bearing fruit, more metaphor, and then the mathematical references to 100, 60, 30. What do these mean? We don't know. We're in the position of the public reading this, and, this is just more metaphor. This isn't an explanation.